Hey everyone, welcome to Prophecy Roundtable. Glad that you're here. We don't have all the answers, but we're going to have a great time. Tonight, we're going to talk about Pharmekia and are we living in a pagan nation? Well, that's probably kind of obvious, right? But what is this Pharmekia stuff? Now, is it wrong to go, get some medication, different stuff? Probably not, but there's that really interesting word, Pharmekia, that we find in the book of Revelation, and we are going to dig deep into that tonight. And I'm going to now hand it off to Joel because Joel is going to give us more information on what we're looking at. And of course, we have a special guest. We have Dr. William Schnoebelen, and we are excited that you are here. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Bill. We're just so glad that you're here. So, Joel, take it away.
Thank you. First of all, I live near Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I live in Paganistan, Minnesota. Jan Markell did a show on this about 3 weeks ago, and I said, I need to get Bill on the show, okay? Because I've been trying to book him for 5 years to come up to the Twin Cities. He knows about our area. He knows about Llewellyn Publishing, which is a pagan publisher, and he knows about spiritual warfare. And so I was hoping that he would come on the show, bless us with his information, because he worked for the dark side a number of years ago. He works on God's side now. He's a Sabbath keeper. He's a great guy. He knows about naturopath medicines and things like that, and he will be a blessing to Bill Schnoebelen.
Shalom.
Right. Hey, we're so glad to have you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
So tell us about yourself.
Well, I have a varied background. Basically, I spent 16 years in the occult and witchcraft. Before that, I was studying to be a Catholic priest. That's a whole story in itself. But anyway, I got involved in witchcraft and kind of trying to make this somewhat short. I kept getting deeper into it because I try to explain to people that magic is like a drug because it's the pursuit of power. And the more of it you get, the more of it you want. And so it's like, they talk in addictions about tolerance and the idea that you need to keep taking more of whatever, booze, heroin, whatever it might be, to get the same, effect. And that's true of magic as well. So I had to keep getting darker and darker. I got involved with the Church of Satan. I got involved with Freemasonry to a very high degree. And because I was advised to become a Freemason by the Grand Master Druid of North America, who should have known because he himself was a 33rd degree Mason. So anyway, I was in all these different weird esoteric groups. And again, to kind of truncate this, because I wrote a whole 350-page book about my testimony. It's called Lucifer Dethroned. But what happened was I'd gotten very deep into the dark, hardcore satanic stuff. And one day I got a check back from the bank because I was sending my dues every year to the Church of Satan. And the lady from the bank there in San Francisco had written on the check, "I'll be praying for you in Jesus' name." And of course, I was so arrogant at that point, I just laughed at it and put the thing in the file and forgot about it. But literally, within a couple of days, it's like a spiritual Mack truck ran over me. I was just totally flattened. I was sick as a dog. I lost all my occult powers. And let me tell you, occult power is real. It's just that it comes from the demonic. It doesn't come from within yourself or your spirit guide or all these airy, fairy, fluffy things that they try to tell you in the New Age movement. But anyway, it was all taken from me. And I know now it was done by the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. But back then I was totally bewildered. And I'd lost my job. I mean, my whole life just went into the dumpster. And I went up, we had a painted black chapel up in our attic with the statue of Pan and pentagrams and all this stuff. And I knelt before the altar to Lucifer and I cried out and I said, "Give me a sign. I mean, I've sold my soul to the devil. I've done all the things you've told me and look what happened, And the amazing thing is that even though I was praying to Lucifer, the Almighty came along and answered my prayer. And literally within a day, these two teenage girls from, Chicago. At this time, I was living in Milwaukee. They contacted me. They were Satanists, and they wanted to come up and meet the great satanic priest, little knowing that I was at this point feeling like something the cat dragged in. So they come up and they said, we want to give you something. It's like a present. And what they gave me were 2 Chick comic books, Jack Chick. I'm sure you all know about those. Angel of Light and Spellbound. And I sneered at them and whatever, they thought they were goofy. They said they were Neanderthal. That was their word. So I just threw them in the box and forgot about them. And see, that was the Almighty's attempt to get me back on the right track. But I was too proud. And so the next day, there was a knock on our door. And guess what was on the other side of the door? Mormon missionaries. Now, mind you, this Grandmaster Druid fellow, 6 years earlier, when we were training under him, he told us that if we ever got into deep trouble or spiritual anguish or whatever, we should join the Mormon Church, because the Mormon Church was started by witches for witches, as a place where, we could go and hang out and appear to be, good old white picket fence, all-American Christian president, which is, kind of underneath a bishop in the local ward. I was on a fast track, went through the temple, which you have to have a special recommend to do that. And the whole temple was like a giant satanic Masonic ritual. And again, that could be a whole probably hour-long discussion. But the point is, it was affirming what this Druid guy had told me 6 years earlier. So I was trying to be a good Mormon. I was reading my Bible. As it happens, the Mormons use the King James Bible. And as the more I read in the Bible, the more I realized that the Mormon Church was flawed. But I didn't know what to do about that. So we ended up having to move to Dubuque from Milwaukee, and I was unemployed for a bit. And we got a thing in the mail about a prophecy seminar. And I thought, well, I'm in a church that has a living prophet, because that's what Mormons believe. So I'm going to go and I'm going to dazzle all of these people with my prophetic insights. And so I went there, and this first time I'd ever been confronted with an evangelical preacher, my whole life, for whatever reason. And this guy just kept shooting me down. And finally, I pulled out the thing that Mormons always use when talking to evangelicals or Protestants or whatever. And I said, well, where do you get the authority to baptize people so they can be saved? Because Mormons believe that there's only 2 possibilities there. Number one, it's the Roman Catholic Church, but they believe that apostatized in the 3rd or 4th century. And the other alternative is, of course, the Mormon Church, which Joseph Smith restored in 1830. So I threw this at him, and he said, well, where do you get the idea you have to be baptized to be saved? It says in Acts 16:31, believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and thou shalt be saved. And that was the verse that the Ruach HaKodesh had for me. It went through my magic Mormon underwear like a bullet through a sheet of wet tissue paper. Because I don't know if you know this, Mormons wear magic underwear. Anyway, and again, we can talk about that if you want. But
you got to be buried in it, right?
They don't wear Fruit of the Loom. So I went home and I was just trembling. I really felt the conviction, and I prayed and I fasted for a week. And finally, I remembered those comic books. And I thought, well, I've tried every other godforsaken thing in the world, almost literally. I'll try this. So I took out the comics and I remember on the back page of this thing, the 4 spiritual laws. I knelt at the foot of my bed and I took off my magic underwear because I didn't want any static on the line when I was praying to heaven. And I prayed the prayer and I got born again. Hallelujah. So that's the short version of my story. And a couple of years later, I got called into the ministry in the realm of mostly apologetics. At first, I worked for 5 years with Ed Decker, who wrote the God Makers book. Maybe you've heard of that. and was mainly working trying to either evangelize Mormons or Freemasons. And then we started our own ministry with One Accord Church Ministries because we were broadening out and also dealing with helping people in the occult and things like that. So our website is withoneaccord.org. I've written 8 books and got dozens of DVDs and tons of free material. I think I sent Joel a couple of links to some of our resources. We have lots of articles people can read on that line. Of course, we have a YouTube channel. So that's the short version.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
Yeah.
And then, so we have a problem with Ephesians 6, where it talks about putting on the armor of God and going out and fighting and things like that. But you claim that you need more than just that you need the Old Testament too. You need the Tanakh. And
Well, I'm
so,
not saying you need it, but I mean, I just think that if there are these other parts of the armor that are hidden in plain sight, so to speak, in the prophets and the Psalms and so on, that we need to also take advantage of those. So, yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with people who just want to stick to the famous passage in Ephesians chapter 6, 12 and following. But, there's other things out there, like the garment of vengeance, the cloak of zeal, the armor of light, the shield of salvation, and all of these different things that are not found in Ephesians 6, but are very powerful things to have at your disposal.
Well, and I would just add real quick that just looking at the passage, the belt of truth. I mean, his word is truth. His Torah, his instructions are truth. So you're not adding anything. You're just using scripture to show that truth is his word, and his word starts in Genesis 1, not Matthew 1.
Oh, man.
So if we're not fighting against flesh and blood people, then who are we fighting against? I mean, are we fighting against demons or principalities or archangels or fallen angels, or who are we fighting against?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
All of the above. I mean, this is one area where there's difference of opinion.
Okay.
But we have been teaching for years, really since the early 90s, that there's a difference between a fallen angel and a demon, that they're not the same thing, because demons are more or less relatively insignificant entities. They can come into a person, they can, possess a person or obsess a person, or, to use the variation of the Greek word that's in the New Testament, they can be demonized. But you can't really have a fallen angel come into you and possess you. That's a higher order of evil magnitude, if you will.
Bill, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Because it says specifically that Satan entered Judas. And
Yeah.
clearly he's a fallen angel.
That's an interesting study, because
Yeah.
and again, this is an area where different people have different theories, but I think Judas is rather different. And I think Judas, he is identified as a son of perdition. And of course, so is the Antichrist identified as a son of perdition.
Oh.
I think that Judas was not necessarily entirely human. He may have been some sort of Nephilim.
Yeah.
He may have been.
What if he started human, and then when he got possessed, he then became the son of perdition?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, there's a mystery there, because obviously Yeshua knew who Judas was, whether he was just a human being that had weaknesses in the realm of finances or whatever, or even if he was some sort of demonic entity or whatever, he knew. And yet he still selected him to be one of the 12. And, that's something that kind of boggles everybody's mind. I'm not, again,
what do you make of Philo of Alexandria, who says that demons are exactly the same thing as angels? Because daemonia just means mighty ones, right?
Sure.
So mighty ones, Elohim means mighty ones.
Yeah.
So, I don't see any distinction at all between those. I think it's just a language issue. And, the only supposed distinction we would have would be from the book of Enoch,
Sure.
But daemonia in the ancient world it was just a very collective term for the gods.
Yeah, the
the
gods,
the mighty
nature
ones,
spirits, whatnot.
and
Yeah,
Satan
sure.
he's the king of the demons, right? He's also has his own fallen angels in Revelation chapter 12. So, I know it's really popular to say that demons and fallen angels are the same thing. I'm in the minority camp here. I think they're exactly the same thing.
Some
And
of
we don't
us
even,
love Heiser.
I know, but I think Heiser's wrong. God bless him. But I think he was very wrong.
Poor guy can't defend himself.
I know it's not fair. It's not fair. I told him to his face though. Okay, at least I told him. When
On
he
this
was still alive,
topic,
I told him.
it is interesting, at least in this passage. I'm not looking at the Greek, and maybe one of you guys can correct me, but it doesn't say we wrestle against demons in this passage.
Well, that was the point. Archon, things like that. So, does anybody have the Greek handy so we could dig through?
Let's move on.
All right, we'll move on. All right. But we're fighting against something.
Hey, we're fighting against something.
Even Doug would admit we're fighting against something.
Yes, I'm on that page. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you think we're fighting against? And why are we fighting? Well, I don't want to fight anybody, but we're fighting somebody.
Well, I think, you look at Ephesians 6, I think we are fighting against principalities and powers, archons, dunamis, things like that are very high level, because there's this in tradition, both from Jewish sources and later from Christian sources, there's 9 levels, 9 choirs, if you will, of angelic beings. And some of them are very lofty that we have very little to do with. But, Paul, seems to be saying here that there are not just fallen angels, but there are also fallen principalities and fallen powers. And, again, the spiritual rulers of this world, and that's what we are fighting against, and of course, there's their human puppets, the various people down here on the earth that are basically sock puppets for the demonic realm. And they of course are persecuting Christians. They are blowing up churches. They are, running satanic groups and abusing children, doing all sorts of evil things. But they're just, being manipulated by these demonic forces. And obviously, I think the church needs to stand up against things like child trafficking and things of that nature, because that's illegal. And we need to preach against that. But at the same time, we need to understand that even the most heinous of these individuals is still, a creation of Elohim. And we need to pray for their salvation, if possible. I got saved out of Satanism. Of course, I wasn't that far into it as these people are that are, killing people. Thank goodness the Almighty got me out of that beforehand. But so I think we're dealing with both human agents, but mostly we're dealing with these high level, spiritual entities. We can just call them fallen celestial beings. And we need to have every part of the armor at our disposal to do combat in the spiritual realm.
And Bill, I don't know if I heard it from you, or maybe we're just on the same path. I don't call the globalists, the elites. I actually call them the head puppets versus the puppet masters, because the puppet masters are these archons, these powers, these principalities. That prince of Persia, that prince of Greece that we see in Daniel. Those would be the ones, the actual puppet masters, and like someone like Obama or someone like Klaus Schwab. They're the most deceived people probably in the entire world, or some of the most, at least in this. And I don't even think those are upper echelon of the humans. No. I don't even think they're the head puppets. They're just the public figures for the.
Yeah, many years ago, like quarter of a century, I guess now, I wrote this book, Masonry Beyond the Light. And in that book, I had this graphic that explained, it kind of decoded the thing you see on the back of the dollar bill, the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States, that pyramid. And in there I show how there's these different layers. At the bottom of the pyramid is the Blue Lodge Masons. Then you go up, and of course, it also gets thinner or more narrow. And then at the top, you have Lucifer, and under him are the 7 archdukes of hell. And this is what you're taught within esoteric masonry and within Satanism. Whether it's true, I don't know. And then under them are the 9 unknown men. And the 9 unknown men are the ones that rule the world. There's one for every continent and one for Israel. And they basically call the shots, like you say, behind the scenes.
They're like the top puppets.
Yeah,
Puppets.
They're the ones that probably nobody even knows. They're not household names like Klaus Schwab or Soros or some of these people.
Yeah, that's the way I understand it. I could be wrong. I certainly have never met one.
What are these forces, these archons, these exousia? What are they? Exousia means like powers.
Sure.
So what are they trying to accomplish? I mean, do they get merit badges? Do they get, let's say they descend another level, do they get a merit badge and they get to wear it, or some kind of a crown on their head? What do they get out of this?
Are you talking about the people or the spirit people?
Whatever we're supposed to fight against in Ephesians 6.
Well, you've got to realize that both in the soul, and I'm not saying I know everything about this, but in my experience, you've got both in the physical realm of Satanism and Illuminism and these high level things like that, and also in the spiritual part of it, the dark forces. It's kind of like the mafia in that there's a hierarchy. And it's ruled by cruelty. It's ruled by punishment. I mean, if you are given an assignment as a human being to do something for, the devil, to corrupt someone, the punishment, if you fail, is terrible. And right up into, the killing you in a very horrible way. And I think a lot of it is not so much the idea of, okay, I get a merit badge. I think it's more like, okay, if I don't do what my superiors tell me to do, I'm going to get whacked big time. I think it's, because, of course, when I was into this stuff, I was told after I'd sold my soul to the devil and become a satanic priest, I was told if I went out and found 7 people and deceived them into signing their souls to the devil, then I would be moved up a notch. I hate to say it, but it's kind of like Amway. If you get enough people under you, and I'm not saying Amway is demonic, I'm just using it as a metaphor.
It's too late.
But that's how it works down here. And of course, the deception is that the higher you go, the more power you have. And that's what this is all about. It's about down here on the earth, people want wisdom. They want esoteric wisdom, what James calls the carnal wisdom, the earthly wisdom, and they want power. And those are the 2 things that the occult in general, and of course Satanism in particular, offers. Because they talk about, like, I read the Satanic Bible many times, and it talks about it. This is unalloyed wisdom. That is what is being offered by Lucifer. And of course, that's a total lie, but he's the father of lies. So most people, and even you think of even like these people that are pagans, most of them get into this either because they want power or because they think there's some kind of secret esoteric wisdom to be had in these things. And many of them are very broken people. We can go into that discussion too, but they're searching for something. And of course, they have this proverbial God-shaped hole in their heart, and they're trying to fill it, just like I did years ago. I did a video at a conference, and I called it Serving God in the Worst Way, because that's what I was doing. I was, as a Mason, as a witch, as a Roman Catholic, as a Mormon, I was trying to serve God, but in the worst possible way.
When was your Roman Catholicism stint? Was it after Mormonism?
Oh no, I was born a Catholic. I'm a cradle.
Oh, okay.
A Milwaukee Catholic.
Well, no, actually, I started living in Milwaukee in my early 20s. I was born and raised here in Iowa, and I wanted to be a priest from a very young age. In fact, I pretended to be a priest. I cut out my mother's bed sheets and colored them, like the vestments and all of that. She loved that, of course. But anyway, and then when I got into the minor seminary, there was all this homosexuality, and it totally freaked me out because, this was back in the 60s, the late 60s, and back then, you hardly even knew homosexuality existed. And then later on, I thought, well, I'm going to try getting back into this. I went to St. Francis Seminary in Milwaukee, got a master's degree there, and the place was crawling with homosexuals. I mean, I don't think there was anybody there that wasn't a queer, and including the Archbishop. So it totally blew me away, and that was part of the reason why I ended up joining the Mormon Church. I just felt so disgusted and so defiled by being around all these people that were pretending to be, candidates for the ministry and being all godly and pious and devout and all of that, and yet they were committing these abominations. So
do you think some of your Catholic background, obviously you made the choices, but some of the occult, I mean, I'll just say it, Roman Catholicism is straight up Luciferianism at the upper levels and echelons once you know the symbolism. But do you think some of that kind of laid a groundwork for you to get deeper into the occult, and accept it? Like I was raised Baptist, and I would not even watch a horror movie if it had demons and stuff in it, because I've always, I'll watch something that's kind of folklore horror movie or slasher movie, but if it had demons, I'm like, no, I don't want to touch it. But do you think your background might have?
Oh yeah, and I tell people, like in Milwaukee, we had a couple hundred people over the years that joined our covens, and because you only have 13 people in a coven, so we had many covens all up and down the west coast of Lake Michigan, and almost, I'd say 7/8 of those people were Catholics. They were disaffected Catholics, but I think you're right. I think there is something in the Vatican, and that's we can probably do a whole show on that. We have a DVD called Catholicism, the Church on Haunted Hill, where I go into a great amount of detail about the occult elements within the Catholic Church, and the fact that the Vatican itself is built on a cursed place that used to be used for divination. It was like a shopping mall of fortune tellers before the Vatican. It was called, the Vatican Hill before even they started building Christian churches there. So yeah, the Catholic Church is a great petri dish for the occult.
Questions, or should I continue? Okay, so let's pretend we're in the end of days at some point in time. And it seems like it. I mean, the news has not been great lately. Israel just launched some attacks against not Syria, but Damascus, which is Isaiah 17:1. So we know about the end times. We study Revelation. We study prophecy here, obviously. Do the people on the dark side understand that there's going to be this fight between Satan and God during the end times? Do they know anything about prophecy? Do they study it? Do they have any idea of when?
Well, to the last part, no. But everything else, yes. I mean, the devil knows the Bible better than any human being. And he teaches his minions what they need to know, but he doesn't teach them enough that they start figuring out that they're on the losing side.
Oh, that's why. Okay.
I knew enough to be dangerous. I mean, having been raised in the Catholic Church, gone to parochial school, attended Mass every day, all this stuff, I don't know if any of you have a Catholic background, but, it's very immersive. and you get mainly you get gospel stories every day. Otherwise, I had never read the Bible. In fact, I was regarded as weird because my folks took me to see in the theater. That's an experience, by the way, to see the Ten Commandments in the theater. And, I was like 8 years old. And it's like, I thought it was so awesome. And, it is an awesome movie, but especially in the theater when you're a child. And we got home, I said, I want a Bible. And my father looked at me like I, was nuts. And he said, you're only 7 years old. You can't understand the Bible. I said, come on, get me. So he bought me a Monsignor Knox Confraternity of Christian Doctrine Bible, which was Catholic Bible. And I started reading the Bible. And eventually the priest, because I was also an altar boy at the time, he said, you shouldn't be reading the Bible because it's full of stuff you don't understand. And you need to have the Holy Mother of the Church interpret it for you. And so that was the end of that. But in terms of your question, I kind of got off on a rabbit trail. But yeah, the higher ups know what's in the Bible, but you see, they believe there's a demonic eschatology. And they believe that if they can, number one, they believe that if they can keep enough people from getting born again, and also that they can defile enough innocent children to prevent them from ever wanting to be born again, that when the second advent occurs, that they will have more soldiers on their side than, Yeshua will have on his side. And they believe that they can overcome the armies of heaven and cast Christ out of the throne room and take over. Now, of course,
this is Isaiah 14 you're arguing, that he's going to ascend and fight and actually win. They actually believe that.
They believe that. At least the brand. Now, mind you, Satanism is, don't take this wrong, but it's kind of like Protestantism. There's lots.
I'm not taking it wrong. There's 100% like it.
There's
protesting daughters of Rome.
It's a rough crowd.
Sects with different theologies, if you want to call it that, and different doctrines of the end times. But the group that I was in, which was a very prominent, powerful group, was called the Brotherhood. That's what they believe. And they haven't, and the devil has kept them from seeing certain things in the book of Revelation, like the fact that, it says, it doesn't say that Yeshua comes back on a white horse and he's got to have this huge army with him to help him. He does it all by himself. He basically, the sword comes out of his mouth, the word, and he just devastates the armies of the enemy just in an instant. But they aren't allowed to see that part. So that's kind of what they believe.
So is this a spiritual battle, a physical battle? We see in Ephesians 6, we're not supposed to get to fight against physical people, but yet they're part of the fight. So what are we noticing here? Is it going to get more? Is it going to increase? And is it spiritual or physical?
Yes. Well, I think in terms, I'm not a pacifist. If somebody is attacking your family, you have the right to defend yourself. But I don't think we should be going around trying to shoot Klaus Schwab or whatever his name is, or any of these other evil people. I think we should be praying for them to get saved. That is how we fight against physical people. But in terms of that are evil, that are working for the devil. But in terms of the spiritual hierarchy, we need to use, the weapons of our warfare, which, are enumerated in Ephesians 6 and elsewhere. We can't obviously get an AK-47 and shoot demons with it. That don't work. You have to understand how to fight and understand where your authority lies. And that's the key component in all of this. And I think, we need to use, we like on our website, we have literally dozens of sample prayers for different kind of, like, for example, we just are literally right over the hump, so to speak, of Beltane, a major witch / satanic holiday. We're still in the orb of that, and we're feeling the heat from that. We feel a lot of warfare coming at us because we've got a lot of different groups mad at us. But it's real. It's very real. And then it kind of lessens as you get further away from these particular holidays, of which there are 8 major holidays around the
And they're Sabbaths, right? They're called Sabbaths?
Sabbats, S-A-B-B-A-T.
Okay. All right. It sounds a lot like what we do.
Yeah, there's Esbats and there's Sabbats.
Okay.
Esbats are the full moon and the dark moon. And different witch covens do this differently, but the way we were doing it was we would meet on the dark of the moon and on the full moon, and that was called an Esbat. It comes from the French word esbattre, which means to gather. And then the Sabbat, S-A-B-B-A-T, those were these major holidays like Beltane or All Hallows Eve or the solstices and the equinoxes.
So, and a lot of those, some of those align with some of the Roman Catholic made up holy days as well, do they not?
Well, yeah. And, of course, plus there's even a certain continuity with the Moedim of Torah, like the fall feasts kind of coincide with the harvest home feast, which is on the fall equinox. And of course, Passover is tied into the moon, the whole thing of the moon and sighting of the moon and all of that. So there, you can.
The enemy loves to take a truth and twist it.
Well, yeah, and he's a copycat because he can't come up with anything original. So, even like in Satanism, he basically copies the Roman Catholic Mass and then blasphemes it. That's the idea of the Black Mass, as it's called, or the Satanic Mass. And
what's strange is the Mass itself is just evil. They're taking Yeshua, and they're killing him daily around the world, and he always is pictured on a cross. Or in the goddess's arms, Venus, Ishtar. I mean, so I guess I don't look at the Catholic Mass as any better than maybe the Black Mass. One's just more blatant and blasphemous, and the other people. And I'm not saying that Catholics know this, but that is pure. The Catholic Mass is straight from hell.
Yeah,
I mean, no doubt about it.
Why do you say that, Scott? I mean, that's a really.
They killed Jesus daily, dude. It was once and for all, one time. Sort of like Goat Boy has Jesus up there killing goats for us daily. The Catholics have Jesus being killed by a Roman Catholic priest every day on an altar, in which our Savior's body literally becomes that little wafer. It's completely mysticism. It's witchcraft. It's pure evil.
He's arguing something called transubstantiation.
Exactly. There's nothing in Scripture that says kill Jesus daily in a wafer and eat him.
Well, let me just say this. I mean, as someone who has a master's degree from a Catholic seminary, that's not really what the idea of transubstantiation is. They would call it a bloodless sacrifice. I agree that it's grossly wrong, but I mean, obviously millions of devout Catholic people believe in it, and there's a lot of piety involved in it, which can be wrong, but they don't believe that the priest is up there killing Jesus.
Well, and I'm not saying that the deceived Catholics, the lay people, are not even saved. I'm not saying that they're not going to be in the kingdom. But this ritual they take place in is very dark.
It certainly can.
Yeah, but I mean, to be fair, Jesus said, "Do this in remembrance of me," right?
Okay.
Well, so look, I mean, obviously, I don't agree with transubstantiation. I don't agree that we need to, have the wafer and all that every day. But for most of these people, they're just like they're trying to do what Jesus said to do.
Right.
So I just think you're being really harsh. I just think you're being
like
very.
Bill said, Catholics don't really.
I agree.
They don't read the Bible.
Well, yeah, but
they're trying.
I mean, I'd be very careful because I think we're all getting things pretty wrong.
I have some charismatic Catholic friends that are persecuted, and so my heart goes out to these poor Catholics that are in a situation where they want their God has called them to be in the Catholic Church and to be a light. And so there are some great Catholic people. And when I was a politician, they were the people pounding the signs for me because they were pro-life. So they do many wonderful things.
And they have been the leaders of the pro-life movement.
They have been. They fight the hardest.
Of many evangelical and especially liberal Protestant churches are just shameful.
Right.
Anyway, it's a complicated thing, like any human institution.
Okay, so we're running out of time here, and I'd like to discuss Paganistan, which was once again Jan Markell's show from a few weeks ago, where she interviewed, and I'm blanking on the name of the gentleman, but they came up to Minneapolis and checked out Llewellyn Publishing, and they checked out this particular section that I live in, which is close, we're between rivers. And so Bill and I talked about this before, that there seem to be river spirits, you call them, marine spirits, something like that. What?
Marine spirits.
Okay.
Not to be confused with the Marine Corps. But yeah, I mean, see, witches, any witch believes in the idea of elementals, they're called. There's fire spirits, water spirits, air spirits, and earth spirits. And without wanting to get too deep into the weeds on this, the marine spirits are particularly nasty. They're kind of like a collision between mermaids and vampires, if you will, but they're not real. They're not physical beings. But because of this, a lot of occultists and New Agers and witches believe that to be near water, like you asked, why do they like to congregate around, like these rivers that you say are up there in your area? It's because they believe they can draw spiritual power from these marine spirits that not only are in the rivers, obviously they're in the oceans too, but they're also in underground, like aquifers and underground streams and things like that. And these witches and whatnot, they believe that they can draw power. They can, like I used to do this. I would do rituals for either fire or water. I'll tell you a story here real quick. We had a fellow, without going into all the details, a rival witch stole our Book of Shadows. In Milwaukee, this was, and had it in a safe. And he had no right to that because he wasn't even a witch. He was just a fake. And I know this sounds kind of petty in retrospect, but anyhow, we called up fire spirits that are called salamanders to go and destroy the book, so he couldn't have access to it. And we heard through the grapevine a couple days later that this guy was in he had a basement office underneath his occult bookstore, and the safe caught fire and blew apart, and everything in the safe, including a lot of his money, was destroyed along with the book, because we had called up these fire spirits to go and take revenge on this fellow. So that's an example of that. But the water spirits are more powerful because they're more unpredictable. That's what the if you will, the theology behind this is. So they will go and they will stand by these rivers and do rituals and try to call these beings up out of the water, and then try to harness their energy to do their magic with.
So I have to admit publicly. Go, Doug.
Yeah. So in Revelation 13, it says that I stood on the sand of the sea and I saw the beast coming up out of the water. And with all of the UFO appearances that seem to be always located over water. There have been many times where they go from 80,000 feet down to water level and even down into the water. And it's not even a splash. There's lots of testimonies to this by U.S. military personnel. And it seems to be that they are living in the oceans of some form, or I don't know how they do that, but that seems to be where they kind of hang out. A number of ufologists have noted that the oceans seem to be where these non-material kind of beings are hanging out. So do you see a correlation between what you've experienced in the satanic realm, the Satanism, and the UFOs?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's and of course, the larger the body of water, like you're talking about, and I'm pretty familiar with the whole UFO thing. I've been studying it for 50 years. They'll go into the ocean, they'll come out of the ocean, and they'll also drain lakes. Like we had when I was living out in Seattle working with Ed Decker, there was a lake up in the Cascade Mountains that people saw this quote unquote flying saucer over it, and the next morning the lake was dry. Stuff like that. That's not that uncommon. And that's because they understand the occult power behind water. And yeah, I think in the ocean, you're probably dealing with some very large, powerful entities of this sort of thing, these marine spirits. And, there's mythology, there's the whole idea of Leviathan, and whatever is one of the 5 major points on a satanic pentagram. I don't know if you know this, but if you look at the classical Baphomet pentagram, the 5 points of the pentagram spell out Leviathan in Hebrew.
Oh, wow.
Lamed, Vav, I can't do it in my head, but anyway, you look at what's on the cover of the Satanic Bible.
Leviathan. Okay.
And,
it's
so
Isaiah.
Leviathan rules the water. All the water spirits are under Leviathan. All of the earth spirits are under Belial or Behemoth. It kind of varies.
Behemoth. Okay, sure.
That kind of thing. Lucifer is over the air spirits, and Satan is over the fire spirits. That's how they look.
Wait, they make the distinction between Lucifer and Satan?
Yeah, many of these groups do. They're dualistic. And I don't know if you know who
Satan is a title.
Light and dark.
Pike is. Albert Pike.
I mean, Lucifer and Satan are exactly the same dude, but according
to talking about the occult.
First, they are from the Bible,
Sure.
but there is a strong strain of sort of a modern version of Zoroastrianism, where they believe there's an evil God and a good God, and that this is a cornerstone of Freemasonry. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I was mentioning Albert Pike a moment ago, but he was the Grand Sovereign Inspector General of the 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite in the 19th century. He was the most honored Freemason. In the 19th century, he was a Confederate war general and one of the 2 founders of the Ku Klux Klan. Interesting little bit of Masonic trivia there. Anyway, he wrote this huge volume called Morals and Dogma that's like the Bible of Scottish Rite Masonry. And in there, he taught that there are these 2 gods, he called them, one God is Adonai, and he's the evil God. And then there's the good God, the light bringer, who is Lucifer.
Hillel.
That's one version of it.
Yeah. Hey, Bill, can I ask you a totally off-topic question? She's my daughter-in-law now, and she was heavily involved in the occult, and she's pregnant, and but she's just so worried that her past, and she has cast all that off and got rid of all the satanic stuff, the pentagram. She still has to cover up some tattoos and everything, but she is so worried that there might be some transference from her past actions to my granddaughter.
Sure.
My wife wanted me to ask him that, so I apologize.
Go for it. This is
a very excellent question. I mean, in the midst of all this theoretical stuff, this is something that's kind of spiritually practical. And we have prayers on our website. We have a whole subsection called Spiritual Warfare and Deliverance. And we have deliverance prayers. And what I would recommend is that, I understand she's, I've repented of it, and whatnot, but it would be good for her to go and pull out. We have a thing, it's called a deliverance procedure, and just see what things might apply, because it's designed to be kind of a do-it-yourself thing. And from what I'm understanding, it doesn't sound like this would be a major thing. But I think it would be very good, especially for the sake both of the child, but also of the mother, to renounce formally, whatever kind of stuff she was into. And we list like the different strong men that go with, okay, let's say you were a Wiccan. Then you would deal with these certain, high level demonic beings that are kind of overlords of Wicca. If you were into something else, like Freemasonry, then there's different strong men.
And back to the topic as far as the occult goes, and I've studied enough to be dangerous, but there is this light and this dark. Lucifer being the angel of light, Satan there's this yin versus yang, this duality, and like a Star Wars, the Force, the good versus the evil. And some people wear the white hat role, and some people wear the evil dark hat role. They're all on the same team.
Exactly.
Ultimately.
And that's why, for example, if you were to see a diagram of a Masonic temple, traditionally they have a pavement that's a checkerboard of black and white squares. And that symbolizes the dark and the light having to be in balance. And then they have the twin pillars that are on the west half of the temple, and all this stuff. And it's all the same dualistic thing that Albert Pike was talking about.
Well, we have a few questions in the chat. I
would just say,
please.
I mean, if you want to give me your email, I can send you a link to those deliverance prayers. I know Joel has my.
I'll forward it to you, Scott. I'll forward it.
And I do have a question related to our topic. We've not really discussed Pharmekia before we get into questions. I would like to ask, and I'll bring it back personal again. I was a crazy idiot when I was young. Well, my son about 2 years ago did way too many mushrooms. He wanted to kill himself. Anyway, that's an example of Pharmekia, psilocybin, and what I believe attached to himself. And he would not, I asked him to pray. I said, look, he said, Dad, I'm not in repentance right now. I'm not living the way I should. We were taking him to psychologist, and he said, all of a sudden his face, he hadn't looked the way he looked. He had not been my son for weeks. We're taking him to the psychologist, and all of a sudden his facial expression changed. I saw him in the mirror, and he said, Dad, can I tell you something? I said, what? He said, I did what you asked, and I no longer have these thoughts. I no longer am being attacked. I'm no longer. And so that was a miracle.
Hallelujah. Yeah, amen.
Yes.
Before we saw the psychologist.
When you do drugs, I mean, and I'm talking now about, illegal drugs, and especially psychotropic drugs, psychedelic drugs. I did a lot of that in the 70s. And, you just blow open the doorways to the demonic. I mean, whatever protections might have been there because of your upbringing, if you were raised in a Christian home or whatever, it just, it like totally destroys all that. And you just, and it's funny, even people, because as you may know, there are legitimate people that are psychiatrists and whatnot that are using psychedelic drugs in a therapeutic setting. But even they will say, those of them that are Christians will say quite often dark things come in unbidden when you even microdose, whether it's LSD or psilocybin or mescaline or whatever. This stuff is really, really dangerous because it takes you into a realm that, when Adam and Eve fell, that whole realm is cut off from them because they were no longer worthy or even capable of entering into that realm. That's how they could communicate with animals, and that's why when, Eve saw this serpent start talking to her, she didn't go eek, like this is a weird thing, because they could communicate with the animal kingdom before, because it says Adam went and named all the animals. And then when they fell, this faculty was taken away from them. And when you take these drugs, then that opens that faculty through demonic power, the spirit of divination. That's what is, and that is probably what your son, at some point, if he hasn't already done so, needs to renounce that and cast it out, or you could pray with him to do that.
Oh.
Because that's what the whole drug thing will do. It will bring in the spirit of divination.
So you can cast this out. If your family members are doing drugs, pharmakia, whatever, and they're starting to lose their minds, so to speak, you can cast it out. There are prayers. And once again, your website, Bill, is what again?
It's withoneaccord.org.
And
we have there, and I'll just say this too. We have in our prayer list, we have this thing. I didn't write it. It comes from Brother Tom White, who was one of the guys that I learned deliverance from way, way back in the 80s. And we call it the arrow prayer for deliverance. And basically if you've got a family member or someone who you believe is having demonic infestation of some sort, you just pray this as often as the Ruach HaKodesh brings it to mind. You just say, and again, this is on our website. I know Joel has the links, but it's called the Arrow Prayer for Deliverance. And it's basically takes about a minute. I expose all enemies of Yeshua HaMashiach operating against blank, whoever. I sever you from Satan and the power above you. I remove your right to afflict blank, and I proclaim your judgment.
Amen.
Weaken you with the blood of Calvary, and we command you to leave this person right now and to go where Yeshua tells you to go by the voice of his Ruach HaKodesh. And we just...
Amen.
And
one more question related to pharmakia, not the psilocybin, not that, but what about the psychotropics that mommies who are anxious, that everybody's pill popping these days because they feel a little sad, and I'm not talking about clinical depression. I'm not talking about people that are full blown schizophrenic that might need these meds, but a lot of times, do you see that what's happening is in these psychotropics, whether any kind of drug for depression, anxiety, things of that nature, do you think a lot of time that's masking the true problem?
Oh, sure. Yes. And the problem is, especially, and again, I worked for 5 years, I have a master's degree in counseling. I worked for 5 years in an addictions counseling center, that those things are addictive. They're very hard to get off of. I'm talking about like antidepressants. And things like, they call them SSRIs, like Prozac was the first.
Mm-hmm.
Those things are dangerous. And I think it is the problem is most psychiatrists are incentivized to just give people a pill.
By Big Pharma.
Most of them are in some sort of HMO or some sort of big hospital system where they're expected to have like 15-minute appointments, and then out they go. And, it's kind of like my friend Ed Decker used to say, it's like the dancing bears in Disneyland. You go through and there's the bears and you're gone, And you can't really help people that way. And of course, as I'm sure you all know, the pharmaceutical industry is a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and they basically specialize in making people sick. And because if you get somebody sick, you've got a lifetime customer. If you heal them, it destroys your business model. So I really advise people, I know sometimes it's necessary, but in psychology, they differentiate between endogenous depression and exogenous depression. Exogenous depression is when you are like, okay, let's say you lost your father or your mother. That's a very legitimate reason to be depressed.
You should be sad.
Yeah, you should be.
It's a natural emotion. There's a time to mourn. That's biblical.
Emotion, but there are people that are depressed for no good reason, and that is this endogenous depression, and that is very often demonic. And like you said, Scott, the problem is that when people take these medications, which can really mess you up, because like, as you may or may not know, a lot of these school shooters are on these stupid SSRI drugs or something worse, and they're very unpredictable. If you look at the warning labels on these drugs, all of them say they can make the person who takes them suicidal, they can make them homicidal, and yet doctors are handing these things out to kids. to primary kids.
Oh,
You know,
they tried
along
to
with,
do,
of course, Adderall and Ritalin and all the rest.
yeah, they tried to do that with Michael, one of my twins. He's about to turn 19, but they tried to do that when he was 4 or 5, and we're like, no.
Because I mean, let's face it, kids have a ton of energy, and I know if I had been, you know, raised in the 90s instead of being raised in the 50s, I would have been put on Ritalin like that, because I was, you know, I was not to brag, but I was a really smart kid, and I was bored in kindergarten and the first grade because I was already reading at like a 5th grade level, and I was squirming around in my seat. And I know it drove the nuns crazy, but bless their hearts, they didn't, you know, like tie me in the chair and, you know, whip me or anything. But, you know, that's the problem. Instead, they're trying to medicate childhood out of these kids. And I don't know if you ever heard of Dr. Peter Breggin.
No, sir.
Okay, he's a psychiatrist. And he and his wife, Virginia, I believe her name is, have been at the forefront of speaking out against over medicating our children. They've also come out against vaccines, this whole COVID business. And as such, they've been banned, you know, from most social media platforms. But, you know, he talks about Breggin in his first book, which I can't think of the name of it now, but the guy is brilliant. And he says basically the psychiatric industry is trying to medicate the divine out of humanity. They're trying to medicate the soul out of humanity. And, you know, we did a video, a DVD on this about 12 years ago called Medical Murder, The Architects of Madness. And in that video, I go through the whole thing about the psychiatric industry and how virtually, and you're right, there are certain things like profound schizophrenia, things like that, that may or may not be demonic, but it's mostly does need to be treated with some kind of strong, you know, something like Thorazine or whatever, because the people can be dangerous to themselves or others. But here's the irony. If you have someone who's demonized, you can give them Thorazine, enough Thorazine to knock over a bison, and it won't slow them down. Just like, you know, the fabled, you know, Gadarene demoniac, that it says that, you know, no chains could hold him and he would, you know, wander around in the tombs and everybody was afraid of him. Because if you're full of demons, you have incredible demonic power. So it's a dangerous kind of thing. And I would always say that the last resort should be these psychiatric drugs.
And the whole world is deceived by her pharmakia.
Exactly. That's, you know, of course, and, you know, I was one of the first people to draw the parallel like a decade or two ago between, you know, the idea of sorcery and the idea of the pharmaceutical industry. So
we're competing against archons, these powers, these creatures, whatever they are, spiritual. And it seems like, Bill, you told me this week that they're entrenched. They dig in, like Llewellyn Publishing in my area here. They have people all over the place. They're entrenched. They are praying against us, and we need to be in the fight against them. The problem is, you know, spiritual warfare is the big thing in Minneapolis. The Christians that I know, it's a big thing in terms of the problem, but in terms of the answer, which is prayer and spiritual warfare, not so much. So what do?
Pray.
Okay.
I mean, that sounds simplistic, but, you know, we talk on a lot of our YouTube videos about the idea of tactical warfare prayer. You know, don't just pray hard, pray smart. And use the tools that Yeshua has given us and understand those tools. And I mean, we have a couple of different, we have one video DVD called Resisting Unto Blood, which is like the sequel to our book, Blood on the Doorpost. We have another video that's called Dimensional Combat in the Armor of Light, because most believers do not understand what the armor of light is. It is one of the most powerful things we can possibly use in terms of being able to be strengthened and fortified and anointed to go into the spiritual realms and do combat against these dark forces. But the problem is, as you kind of indicated, is that most Christians don't want to do this.
Right.
They have this worldview that they kind of live in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood.
Sure.
And that everything is all hunky-dory, and that they don't realize, and I mean, I'm not trying to sound crazy or anything, but frankly, there's a lot of people out there in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood that are devil worshipers, that are, they don't walk around in black capes with tattoos with pentagrams on their forehead. They could be lawyers or doctors or any other respectable kind of person, but they worship the devil. And they are working to destroy the Christian church. That is their mission. And if they can do that, and I think I told you, Joel, when we were on the phone yesterday, that I was given, when I was a Satanist, I was given the job of infiltrating Stuart Briscoe's church in Brookfield, Wisconsin. Big, powerful church. I don't think it was a mega church at that time, but anyway, and I was supposed to go in there. I was given false tongues so I could appear to be a spirit-filled Christian, and it was demonic. And I was going to get in there, and then after ingratiating myself to the people in the church, I would turn around and I would accuse the pastor of making a pass at me and being a homosexual, which would, of course, ruin him. And fortunately, the Ruach HaKodesh reached in there, and through the events I chronicled earlier, got me away from that and got me knocked on my back and ultimately saved. But the Satanists are not above doing that sort of thing, whether they're a man or a woman going into a powerful church or, Messianic congregation for that matter, and sowing discord, either making false accusations or doing gossip, lashon hara, all kinds of stuff to weaken the fabric of the congregation. Again, whether it's a Messianic church or Pentecostal or evangelical, whatever. Because the devil, that's what he does. He's the slanderer. He's the accuser. He's the divider. That's what diabolos means.
So we're getting close to a hard break. Doc, you had mentioned 60, 70 minutes. Doug, you had mentioned 60 minutes. We have some questions. Are we allowed to take one or two?
Let's take them for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, would you pick them out, Doug, since you've been reading them?
There's some really good ones. I already picked them. Did the Star of David on the Israeli flag come from the pentagram or vice versa? Looks similar.
There are two different things.
I have a bunch of research on that too, if you need.
Yeah, I mean, it is not satanic. It's called a hexagram. Yeah. And the Magen David is not a satanic symbol. The pentagram is a satanic symbol, especially if it's inverted. But if you look in, like I used to have all these high-level occult books and whatnot, and you would always, if you had a six-pointed star, you would always be inside of a circle. Okay, and you don't see that on the Israeli flag. You just see the six-pointed star. And, since I became, Torah followers and all of that, I know a lot of people will say, well, it's the idea of the paleo version of the letter Daled, which is a triangle interlaced, because David's name is, Daled wa Daled. And no, I don't think it's the same thing by any stretch of the imagination. See, 5 is the number of death.
Oh, that's it. Thank you. I was going to ask you that. So you covered it. Okay.
That's very cool. And just so people know, if you look at Acts chapter 7, and it says that, you had the Star of Remphan, that is a terrible transliteration. It completely got messed up. It's from, Micah or Malachi. I forget which one. But basically, they... it's I have it in my book, Corrupting Image Farm too. I go into
star.
Sorry,
the 8-pointed star is an occultic symbol.
The 8-pointed star is the star of Ninurta, Nimrod, Ashtoreth. So that's what they were talking about, and not something to do with the Jewish Magen David, which is the shield. So I think this is a great question. Why is the use of blood on magic rituals? I mean, this could be a whole show right here.
That's
Come back, Dr. Bill.
Well, yeah, I think I'll just do this one and then we'll call it a day. But we can do this again. But what I was starting to say is, like it says in Leviticus, the blood is the life, and all people that are magicians, particularly black magicians, Satanists, and so on, they believe that if you shed blood, you can get energy from that blood. And they believe that if you kill someone, that's a real huge amount of magical energy that you can channel to use to send curses. And they also believe that the younger the person is when you kill them, the more power there is. Because, like say a 5-year-old child,
Or innocent.
60 or 70 years of life ahead of them minimally. And by killing them, you're getting all those years. And they believe they can extend their life by killing children, by sexually violating children, by, drinking their blood.
They charge the energy. What's in it for the demon or whatever the spiritual entity is? What's in it for them?
Power. See,
power. Okay.
So
this suggests that they have a lack of power.
Matthew 28, Yeshua says, all power on heaven and earth is given unto me. The devil has no power except what we choose to give him. Fallen people, whether it's Christians who are struggling or whether it's Satanists that are openly doing evil things. And I think what happens is that when there's these, like, for example, abortion. Abortion is obviously killing the youngest possible human being. That is a huge amount of energy for the demons. They love that. That's why the demons are fighting so hard to try and keep abortion legal. And it's, of course, it's Moloch worship. But so the reason for the blood is it gives the demons power, and ultimately, again, it's like the top of a pyramid. It gives Satan power.
Would you say the alphabet soup nonsense is also some way that the demons are trying to control people and getting little boys to think they're little girls and vice versa?
Oh, sure. That's a perverse spirit. It's a spirit of confusion, and it's a direct affront to the divine order that we find in the Bible. That obviously Elohim put into our very DNA, that I was born a man, someone else is born a woman, and that's not like he makes mistakes. But yeah, that's demonic. That's why so many of these people you see that are supposedly trans or whatever, they have this dark, soulless look in their eye, and they're so miserable and so depressed, unless, of course, they come to Messiah.
Yeah. Wow.
We'd love to have you back, Bill. So
work on that, I'm sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. And people, I'm sure you enjoyed it too. So hopefully we'll hear some comments about inviting him back. So, Doug, if you want to finish it out.
Yeah, and somebody said it's the Star FM Amos 526. Thank you. I totally blanked on the book. But yeah, guys, thank you so much. We're just really glad that you join us. We always try to have a great conversation. If you want to be part of this, if you want to become a producer, go to patreon.com/Doug Hamp. You can give whatever seems right to you. All right. If you want to kind of give like a coffee a day, you can do that. If you want to get fancier, you can do that. It makes a huge difference. I just want you to know that. All right. So huge shout out to the patrons. It really does make a difference. I am going to be starting a new YouTube channel. All right. I've got more details coming on that. And I'm really excited about it. It's going to be a faceless channel, so you're not going to see me, but you'll hear me. And we really believe that we can reach, a lot of people in a very different way. I almost kind of feel like the church model is kind of petering out, and that, YouTube is kind of church for a lot of people, unfortunately. And so we're going to produce some well-produced, high-quality, faceless videos. Our first video is going to be Nimrod. I think you guys will love it. We're going to have another video about Satan. So some of the topics that we talk about here, we're going to have on that channel. Plus, some of the things to encourage you. So I will be letting you know as it comes out where you can get that. So expect that next week I'll be giving you guys the link, and I do hope that you will join us on that. So thank you so much, Dr. Bill. Thank you once again, everyone. God bless you guys, and have a good